I don't know if you've ever had one of those like before and after, line in the sand, everything changes kind of moments. But I had a moment about 3.5 years ago. I was 36. I had 2 sons. One was a baby who was not, sleeping wasn't really his good thing that he did. He was very cute, but he was not a sleeper. I was trying to get a book finished. It had recipes as a part of it, and I was just testing recipes all the time. And I loved all these pieces of my life, but increasingly I felt further and further from myself, from God, from my family, from kind of the way I thought life was supposed to feel. Things felt fast and they felt heavy, and I felt pressure in every moment. And I could feel this building in little ways. And then there was a moment, it was October, and I was at an event in Dallas, and I felt so wrung out and so exhausted. And in between speaking sessions where I would normally talk with people or go outside, I went back to my hotel room and I laid on the bed, fully clothed, shoes on, and I looked up at the ceiling and I said to myself, this way of living is over. My spiritual life had become more pressure than respite. My relationships were distant because I never had enough to give. My physical health was failing. I slept poorly, I ate poorly, and it showed in every area of my life. And things felt heavier and more fractured than I wanted them to feel. And I just sat there in the silence. I had no idea how to disappoint people that expected things from me. But I knew in a deep way in that moment that no matter what it cost me, I was going to find a new way of living. A way of living that was not marked by pushing and proving and earning and competing. That wasn't marked by exhaustion and isolation. I wanted to live a life drenched in love and soaked in grace and full of meaning and connection. And my life didn't look anything like that at the time. And so in that moment, even though I didn't have any idea what the next steps would be, I said, this is it. This is my before and after. I'm not going to live this way even one more day. Our boys are crazy about the Peanuts movie with Snoopy and Charlie Brown. And it's so fun because obviously I grew up with like the comic strip and the Charlie Brown Christmas movie. And now they're so excited about this new Peanuts movie. So we all went to see it, a couple months ago as a family. It was a really fun thing to do together. And so, I'm at this place in my life where I'm trying to figure out what's happening. How did I get to this place where things feel so fragmented and so off, so different from the way I wanted them to feel, from the life I thought I was building? So I'm thinking about the Peanuts movie, and I'm thinking about, there's one little guy named Pigpen. And even when he's standing perfectly still, do you remember this? There's like this swirl of dirt around him. That's just like how he is. Like he lives surrounded by like this swirl of dirt and dust, okay? And so I realized like that was me. And I'm thinking like, how odd that I've got all this chaos circling around me. Everywhere I go, it's still there. And for a while, I thought it was just like a funny coincidence. Like, this has just been like a little stretch of time that's pretty busy. I guess this just happened to me. Or, man, things are always so full and complicated and chaotic in my life. Isn't that strange? And I feel like it's sort of like when you meet a girl and she's like, I don't know why, but drama just always finds me. Like it's totally not me. It's just like I happen to find myself in the center of all this drama. And then you watch her like steal someone's boyfriend and trash another friend. And you're like, really? Like I feel like maybe the common denominator for this drama, like it might be you. And so for a while I was just, like, oh, I don't know how this is happening. I'm always too busy, always. So weird. And my life always feels overly complicated and chaotic and kind of jammed full of too many things. Like there's not even space to breathe or rest. How odd, right? That this keeps happening to me. And at a certain point, I had to say to myself, I think you're making this. I think you're the one, like the common denominator in all these dynamics, right? It's me. I was keeping myself too busy, and I was filling my life too full. I was playing too many roles. I was pushing too hard. And the only person responsible was me. And in some ways, that's kind of a hard thing when you're like, oh no, I did this, right? You know, sometimes you meet a person who, they tell you, it's just such a funny coincidence that all of their friends are mean people, right? There's broken relationships everywhere through their life, with their family of origin, with their kids' teachers, with their neighbors. It's just like a lot of mean people, right? You start to think her little pig pen thing might be her inability to relate to people, right? So she thinks she's doing it to someone else. Or, you know, we all know people who every church they go to is a bad church. Maybe, and there are some bad churches, but maybe that's their kind of pig pen. That's the swirling dirt that they bring into every situation. So it was really meaningful for me to kind of sit down and say, what is it that I've been dragging through my life into every situation through all these years? And for me, it really comes down to essentially two things. Too busy, too much. And you can sort of look at that like pride and gluttony. And, you know, some people like, you know, kind of like really like religious words for that. And some people, you know, don't like. So some people call that like your besetting sin or your shadow side. But they're essentially the things that are in you, that have probably always been in you, that you're going to battle in order to be the best version of yourself, right? So there are a lot of things that aren't particularly difficult for me, but pride and gluttony are really tough. So the pride part is, I think I can do everything. And I think that doing everything will somehow make me happy. So I'll be your friend who brings a meal and I'll say yes to that deadline. And I will take your kids and then I'll do that quick work trip. And the idea that I'm so capable, I got really invested in the idea of being a super capable person. And so I wore myself out in order to live up to that expectation I had for myself, to that identity I was putting on myself. And then gluttony, I just want to eat more, see more, do more, read more, go more places. It's like I'm going to gobble up all of life in huge bites. But too much of anything makes you sick. It makes you tired. And so I ended up really sick and really tired. And I ended up sick and tired physically. But more than that, I ended up sick and tired on the insides. So gluttony, essentially, there's a lot of different ways that people define it, and sort of an old-fashioned word, but essentially it's that hunger, that ravenous sense that I want to eat more, buy more, experience more, see more, read more, go more places. It's sort of this insatiable desire for everything. And unchecked and untended and left to its own devices, you'll just run yourself completely ragged, trying to consume every single thing this world has to offer. And I found myself just stuffed with experiences, with food, with things, with stamps on my passport, all good things, but too much of everything. And the volume and chaos of my life, because of the choices that I had made, became so high that I couldn't feel or connect with my own soul. We like to believe, I think, that no matter what, our souls will just retain this sort of beautiful, connected, life-filled way of being, right? That they'll be fine, right? It doesn't really matter. They'll just keep chugging along. But a soul is like anything else. A soul is like any other part of us. It's fragile. It needs to be tended. It needs to be loved. Sometimes it needs to be healed. I think we like to believe that no matter what, our soul, or caring for our soul, that can wait. When things slow down, when the kids are bigger, when money is not so tight, when things feel a little more spacious, then we'll tend to sort of the optional things like souls. We think they'll just probably be fine until we have the time or the space or the inclination to really pay attention to whatever's happening on the inside. But what I realized that day in Dallas was that I had left my own soul untended for so long. And the damage I did was starting to spread itself all through all the different parts of my life. I know it shouldn't have surprised me, this distance between the way I wanted to live and the condition in which I ultimately found my soul that day in Dallas. It shouldn't have surprised me because I know better than this. I know that our souls never thrive, never flourish, never grow in deep and beautiful ways when we've lived lives where we've stopped paying attention to them. One thing I found was that for many of us, rather than face what we've done to our own lives, rather than kind of dig down deep and be really honest about what's causing us to make these choices, many of us just prefer to keep moving. And that's what I did. I just kept moving. I let activity and responsibility and hustling kind of anesthetize me, keep me safe, keep me from having to face the things that I needed to face on the inside of my life. And so some of us choose busyness. Some people choose overworking. Some people choose working out obsessively, or shopping obsessively, or drugs, or alcohol, or illicit sex, or gambling, or risky behaviors, or whatever. There are so many things that we can use to kind of anesthetize ourselves, to build a buffer between the searing pain on the inside of our lives and the thing that people see on the outside. A lot of times that distance is created by the buffer that we use. What I chose was hustling, was just being so busy that I could outrun my feelings. I could outrun my fear. If I moved fast enough, it felt like I was running on thin ice, like a cartoon, and right behind me, the ice was cracking. But if I just stayed ahead of it, I would never fall under the water. If I moved fast enough, I didn't have to feel the fear or the anxiety or the regret of what I had allowed to happen to my life, to my closest relationships, to my relationship with God, to my own soul. We all have those things, right? Those things that we grab onto in order to keep us from facing the truth about our lives. And I feel like I became someone who was known for moving fast all the time, for being incredibly capable, for hitting deadlines and multitasking. I was extremely efficient. Efficiency and responsibility were these very valuable words to me. Because somewhere I developed the idea, or I believed the myth, that if you do enough, you will be enough. That if you do more, you'll be more. That if you hustle and prove and earn and win, you'll get something, you'll get somewhere. Where I ended up was alone and exhausted. I believed a whole group of myths that said, the more you do, the happier you will be. And so I did, and I found myself desperately unhappy. And we all have those ideas, those stories that we tell ourselves, those myths about how life will be if we just this. My friend Glennon says, and I love this phrase, and I feel like it's applicable in so many different situations. She says, there's no there. A lot of us are living with great pain or great frustration or at great personal cost because we think it's all going to be worth it someday. If there's enough money in the bank at some point, if I hit that number on the scale, if I such and such. And then what happens? You hit that number on the scale, or you get that amount of money in your bank account and you realize there's no there. There's never enough money. The number on the scale is never low enough. There was never enough things that I could accomplish that finally made me feel like I could rest. And so I believed that the hustling would bring me somewhere. And all it brought me to was exhaustion and isolation. And I feel like this kind of trend of hustling, or this impulse to hustle, to move more quickly than we were made to run at a higher speed, to push and earn and perform, it can look a lot of different ways, right? Like a lot of times we think like, oh, that's just for like big fancy corporate people, or that's just for this kind of person. And but I think this way of living, this sort of wound up earning, pushing, proving rhythm, you can see it in all kinds of different ways. I have a friend who is a stay-at-home mom, has 3 little kids at home, and she's hustling from morning till night, believing that if her home and her kids are perfect, she'll finally be safe and happy. And so their home is always getting one more thing and one more room and one more redo. And the kids are always going to one more thing and one more class. And you get the idea that this is all a very elaborate, very difficult way of proving something important. So she may not have a big fancy job or a corner office or a set of employees or a boss or whatever, but just the same, she's hustling. She's hustling for her worth because she doesn't believe that she's measuring up without it. I think it's really tricky. So many of my friends, obviously myself included, are in that kind of freelance space. And it's so tempting to just take one more job and one more job and one more writing assignment or one more weekend away. And because the more you do, there's that myth that the more you do, the more you are. That if you do more, you will be more. And there's a kind of pervasive mentality that says you want to strike while the iron's hot. That if I get a job, I can't say no. That if someone's offering me work, I have to take it. But that mentality then leads us to lives where we can never rest, where we can never stop, when we can never say, there, I've done enough. I realized at a certain point, I was talking to my husband about it, that all I wanted was, like a voice from heaven to say to me, you're allowed to stop. You've done enough. You've cleaned enough. You've written enough. You've whatever enough. You're allowed to stop. I think for some people, it's not even as much about like the achieving side of hustling as much as it is about kind of the need meeting, especially for women. There's that idea that a good woman or a good Christian woman is everything to everyone. So you're like the number one emergency call person for like 100 different people. You're helping her and helping him and bailing him out and making things easier for her and bringing a meal to him and letting them stay with you for 2 months. And you just have this, if I give enough pieces of myself away, I'll get to where I want to be. One of the more kind of challenging aspects that I realized as I was walking my way through this journey was that essentially life as a Christian is about giving. It's about loving, it's about serving, sacrificing, pouring yourself out on behalf of other people. I was raised to do that. I believed in that. I still believe in that. But I also knew that I wasn't just giving, I was overgiving. I wasn't just loving, I was loving to the point where I didn't have anything else to give. I wasn't just pouring out, I was pouring so much more out than I could continue to do in a healthy way. And so I didn't know still the way to get from here to there. But I realized that this journey would have to be even deeper, even more difficult, that it would be less about time management and less about learning new skills and more actually about a whole remodeling of my faith and of my soul. The problem, the design flaw with all of this, whatever way of hustling might pertain to your life or your habits, is they all kind of have a, if I do this, then I'll get this. But there's no there. It's a faulty mechanism all the way through. We have boys, so we've been to the ER kind of a lot of times, like parents of boys do. And there's some times when you go and it's like kind of a judgment call, like, do we need to go? Can we just serious Band-Aid this? But there was one time specifically where it was not a judgment call at all. Our son Mac was 2 and he jumped off the stairs onto a hardwood floor, and the first thing that hit was his little forehead. And it was very clear that this was an ER situation. This was not a, can we tweak it? Is it a maybe? Can we make some small adjustments along the way? My friend Greg says that no one ever changes their life until the pain level gets high enough. And that's what I felt in that moment, in that hotel room in Dallas, as we'd been inching toward this. And things were becoming a little bit more difficult, a little heavier, and then I hit that threshold. This was my life as it stands right now is no longer something that I can do. I've created a life that's too heavy for me to keep carrying it. And the pain level was high enough that I was willing to change everything, no matter how long it took, no matter how much it cost me, no matter how difficult it was. And I got an email, I don't know if you do this, but I got an email from a mentor of mine, a friend who I just love. So we live in Chicago, she lives in San Francisco, and she was inviting me to go to this class in San Francisco. So I'd stay with her for a week. And instead of saying yes or saying no, I just left it in my inbox because every time I looked at it, it made me so confused. It like highlighted that problem in my life of like, I want to, but I'm tired, but I can't, but I feel like I want to be with you and I want you to help me, but I need to be home more because things aren't working. And so every time I opened the email, I just closed it back up again. And then finally, because she's known me for 20 years, I replied and I said, this is how my life feels. And I'm isolated, I'm exhausted, I'm a little bit scared. I'm not connected to my kids and to my husband and to my own self and to God in the ways that I want to be. Something's broken and I don't know what to do. And so I want to come and I don't want to come. And there's a lot of other things. And it's like one of those emails you can only send to someone who's known you for 20 years. So I like blurred all this out on my laptop. And like maybe 20 minutes later, she emails back and she says, stop right now. Remake your life from the inside out. Stop right now. Remake your life from the inside out. And I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I knew that my work, that the path ahead of me was about learning to stop and remake my life from the inside out.